You're watching TelecomTV from the MEF 16 event in Baltimore. And I'm joined now by Christopher Cullan of InfoVista and Eric Lesser of Charter Communications. Gentlemen, good to see you both again.
Nice to see you.
End of a long week at MEF 16. But before we go, we want to touch on the subject of service assurance. Christopher, first of all, how do we actually define service assurance?
At a high level, it's really everything involved, processes, methodologies in ensuring the quality of service of that network. When we talk about MEF, MEF has focused so far on service activation testing, so kind of making sure it's up and running and working at the beginning, and then operationally the performance management and the fault management.
What has the MEF done in terms of these white papers? What papers have been published?
So what we've tried to do with the white papers is make available to most of the operators and providers the ability to digest easily what it means to provide service assurance and service performance monitoring to the end user, right? How do we collect that information? What does it mean to collect those metrics and provide that data back?
So who are these papers for? Who should be reading them?
In a way, everyone, but the way the papers are organized, there's two parts. And everyone should start at the beginning, which is really focused on the business reasons. So defining it and why is it important from a business level. So if you're product, if you're finance, I mean, that's where you should begin, and you can drop off right after that section. When you move still in product and maybe a little bit more engineering, you want to understand what these metrics are, so kind of the what. So you continue on with that first part. And then the technical people who really want to understand the how should move on to part two. So that way you can kind of cover everyone, but not everyone has to go through the entire piece. That's the way it's set up.
And why now? Why is the time right to publish these papers and for us to really get to grips with service assurance?
I think it's absolutely critical now to have that information more than any other time because we're finding that it's business critical. We cannot survive without having that information readily available, not only internally, but being able to provide that information back to a customer. Here's how your service is performing. It's not just a nice to have. It is now something that we're mandated to provide to a customer.
And from Charter Communications perspective, did you find any specific challenges in deploying service assurance?
Absolutely. We've been providing service assurance for many years, but it initially grew out of a homegrown solution, and we had to develop something that could be used for any customer that we would provide access to. And that took a while to develop, right? So we're getting requests from customers to provide that data, and then we have to go back and do research and figure out, well, what kind of information are you looking for? Then we have to go back and create that, provide it to the customer, and go through those development iterations before we come back and realize that we're providing the right kind of information to them. With the MEF standards now, I believe that we can create that one time, and it can be understood by many customers in the community, and we can do that in a single development iteration.
So it's going to benefit the whole industry, as you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our research has shown that the number one challenge in assurance for carrier Ethernet providers is vendor interoperability, and the next one is standards. So these particular standards have existed for a little while, and we're starting to see, I think mutually, some adoption in the ecosystem. So service provider adoption, network equipment adoption, software provider adoption. And I think it now is the time to make that understanding and awareness more accessible to the broader community so they can make sure they take advantage of it, cost savings, et cetera.
Now, how does this fit with Y.1731? Because there's a lot of acronyms and numbers in this business, and there's sometimes some confusion. Is this the same thing?
Yes and no. So Y.1731, which has actually been renamed to G8013, for those that want to fool their friends and stump their buddies at the bar. But Y.1731 is essentially standard put out by the ITU And to simplify it a little bit, it's a method of measurement. So think of it as a ruler. The MEF performance attributes leverage those rulers or way of measuring things. But it's more than that. It's a way of describing the performance of a service. So I'll give an example. Everyone understands this concept of latency or delay. So if you think of one-way delay, Y.1731 can give you one test. The one-way delay this one time was 100 milliseconds. The MEF performance attribute says, what is the objective over a certain number of tests in a certain period of time? And that means, let's say it's 95% of the time I want to be 100 milliseconds or less. So the difference is, one is a measurement, one has to do with the actual service level you're delivering. And that's what the end customer cares about, that's what they're buying. And so that's the nuance that's important to understand, and why, yes, it uses Y.1731, but it is not equivalent to Y.1731.
Very clear. We've got to update our numbers and acronyms here, don't we? Eric, a final question for you then. What would be your advice to other service providers and indeed the industry as a whole?
I think that the white papers that have come out about service performance are very critical in helping teams within an operator provider be able to understand how to not just collect the metrics, how to send the protocol and all the test frames, but then how to interpret that and how to share that information back with the customer that we're providing a good quality of service for them.
Eric and Christopher, thank you both very much indeed.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.